All right. Today, we're going to be talking about Egyptian beliefs, Egyptian religion, and corresponding that with the evolution of Egyptian society. So, what I want to do is I want to go to the earliest perspectives of Egyptian religion. Well, not maybe not the earliest, but a little bit into the pre-dynastic period and talk about their gods. Now, every now and then, I will move forward in time, even when I'm going through this evolutionary kind of format, because we have to follow these ideas wherever they go. We got to follow these rabbit holes. But at the same time, um, I really want you to have a great idea of how Egyptian ideas do change. And what we understand as Egyptian religion today is kind of a conglomeration of different ideas and themes and conceptions that are ever changing. So we're going to start off with. I want to do a little bit of images here. I want to start off with one of the earliest gods that were worshipped, and that happens to be Horus. So go ahead, Margie. Show us Horus here. There's Horus, right? This is the patron god of Upper Egypt. Uh, this is the hawk god Horus. It originated from the city of Nikon. Eventually, during the pre-dynastic period, Horus became not only the representative of Upper Egypt, but also came to represent the black soil of the Nile. Now, his rival, of course, was Seth, who had become the patron god of Lower Egypt and connected to the red soil of the desert. Now, without question, Horus is the oldest documented god of Egypt and starts off as the patron deity of the city of Nikon in Upper Egypt, which is first excavated in 1894. There are many ceremonial pre-dynastic artifacts were discovered here, and it was a sacred city of Horus. And we can see this, it's even including the Narmer palette. Let's go to the next picture, the Narmer palette. Here's a Narmer palette, which has the earliest example of hieroglyphics dating to around 3000 BC and is associated with the pharaoh Narmer. The Egyptologist Michael Hoffman confirmed that this temple that was found there was indeed dedicated to Horus, as the principal deposit found within the temple was filled with offerings from pharaohs from all the way the Old and Middle Kingdoms, going all the way back to the pre-dynastic period for Horus. For after all, they believed that Horus was the god who permitted them with the right to rule Egypt, as well as possess them, literally possess them, so they may have the authority to do so. And so there you have that. Now, let's go to the next picture. So this falcon god was believed to be the god of the sky and was already worshipped in the pre-dynastic period, as related specifically to the power behind the king, making him an early national god. By the time of the pyramid texts, 24,000, 23,000 BCE, during the Old Kingdom, Pharaoh became viewed as both Horus and Osiris, the god of the underworld in aspect, acting as Horus in life and as Osiris in death. Once Pharaoh died, Horus was believed to incarnate as the very next Pharaoh. Now that Horus and Osiris were connected to one another through Pharaoh, the question centered upon how they were related. Eventually, Horus became viewed as the son of Osiris and the goddess Isis. Now, in the capacity as a child, Horus was depicted naked, sitting on a lotus with a finger in his mouth. In other representations, he is shown sitting in the lap of Isis, often suckling in a manner reminiscent of the later Madonna and child iconography. His name not only means falcon, but can also mean the distant one. We take a look here at this image, though. You see Horus as the sky god, but we see somebody else on the left-hand side. Who is that? That is Seth. So you see, so this is an image of both Horus and Seth together. Okay, so Horus, as the sky god, was believed to encompass both the sun and the moon, with the sun represented by his right eye and the moon represented by his left eye, with both spheres moving because he empowered them to do so through his power of flight. Of course, many wondered why his sun eye was brighter than his moon eye, and so it was explained in the story known as the contending of Horus and Seth, that Seth, the patron god of Lower Egypt, fought Horus, the patron god of Upper Egypt. The battle was fierce, with Seth losing a testicle and with Horus losing his left eye. As a result, Seth's loss of his testicle, well, as a result of that, the desert regions represented by him became infertile, while Horus received a replacement eye from the moon god Khonsu that was not as bright as the one before. In the end, the god supported Horus, and so Seth lost the war, resulting in the unification of Egypt. So let's go to the next image. So you see right here, you see Lower Egypt is north, Upper Egypt is south. And it's kind of funny because the Nile River runs from south to north. And so for them, in our perspective, but for them, all the majority of these rivers that across in the continent, when they went to Asia, they thought to themselves, how come all these rivers are running the wrong way? It's like, no, I think it's just your river for the most part. But so just think to yourself, Upper Egypt is connected with the god Horus, and Lower Egypt is connected with the god Seth. And of course, it is drier except for the delta region there. So let's go to the next picture. Okay, Seth is sometimes called Set. He was the Egyptian god of the desert, the dry lands of the red soil, and storms, and eventually came to be known as the deity of disorder and even violence. But that was not always the case. He was once believed to work for Ra on his solar barge, and when the sun god went below into the underworld for the night, Seth helped him fight Apophis, or Epep, the serpent of chaos. In other words, Seth was not only not the god of chaos during this early period, but actually fought chaos. As god of the desert lands, he proved to be a balance for Horus, who represented the black fertile lands about the Nile. So you see, when the Nile River flooded every year, it left behind a heavy silt of black soil that was very rich for crops. Early on, Horus represented this very rich black soil. Now, there is a story that is depicted here. You see in this image, and it's pretty controversial. It's really controversial. And I'm going to go ahead. Thank you, Margie. We'll stop for a few moments there. It's wonderful. And how does that story work? Well, the story goes as follows. It's found in the papyrus of Chester Beatty manuscripts. So Seth decides to prove his dominance over Horus by attempting to seduce him through his powers and to actually have intercourse with him. But just as he was about to, make his release, Horus quickly places his hands between his thighs and caught Seth's semen just in time, casting it into the Nile River. In return, Horus decided to prove his dominance over Seth through his own natural cunning nature, sprinkling his semen upon Seth's favorite food, which happened to be lettuce. After ignorantly consuming the lettuce offered by Horus, both appear before the gods to have them decide who was dominant over whom. Seth declared that he was dominant and called forth his semen intended for Horus, but it replied from the Nile River, and so his claim had not been justified. Horus then called forth his semen, and it replied from within Seth, but Seth was not convinced, and so the two continued to fight for the next 80 years. There's another contest. I'm telling you real Egyptian stories, but of course they don't necessarily fit our perspective of a typical nice little mythological yarn. In another story, another contest, the two gods challenged one another to a boat race where they were to race one another with boats made out of stone. Well, Seth's boat of stone immediately sunk to the bottom of the Nile River, while Horus's boat easily floated and won the race. Again, Horus had deceived Seth by actually having a boat made out of wood that was painted to resemble stone. Oh, I got you now. At this point, Seth stepped down and gave the sole crown to Horus. Eventually, Seth became the ultimate villain, especially in the story of Osiris and Isis. Now, Osiris was the god of the underworld, the afterlife, and the dead, while his wife, Isis, was the goddess of the realm of life, of nature, and of magic. Now, I do have something I want to show you. I just happen to have here a real image of Osiris. This is real, about 3,000 years old. Woo-hoo. So this is Osiris. Is this pretty cool? I know it's hard to make out. Why is it hard to make out? Well, because Osiris, he is darker. Why? Why is he dark? Because, again, as I said before, he represents the black soil of the Nile, the fertile soil, and so his image is essentially black, and that's why his image here is black. Again, I'm sorry, it's hard to see him, but that's due to that particular reason. There we go. So let's tell you, just go here and tell a little story here. So the story goes, Osiris is essentially the god of the earth and vegetation. And what he did is he died every year during the annual drought. And then what happens is that Isis, who was a nature goddess, had the power, the magic to help resurrect him so that he could live and thrive again, as represented by the inundation of the Nile. He is sometimes depicted with green skin in connection to plants, and sometimes with black skin, as we just saw in a real image from that time, in connection to the rich, fertile mud of the Nile. This makes Osiris very much like many of the other dying vegetative gods throughout the ancient Near East. Many Egyptians stories tell Osiris was originally the son of Geb and was very unhappy. He happened to be very unhappy about the primitive and even brutal eating habits of his people when he inherited the throne, with many of them even practicing cannibalism. So he set out to teach them how to sow seeds and harvest the yield, along with giving them laws with the assistance of course, Thoth, the god of wisdom. Osiris was depicted as a very kind king, but he wished others to learn agriculture. So he traveled outside of Egypt, leaving his kingdom to be watched over by his wife and queen. Of course, that's going to be Isis. At this point, Seth enters into the picture, and he forms a plot to both have Isis as his wife and gaining the land of Egypt from her husband. Now, when Osiris returned during the 28th year of his reign, Seth and 72 other conspirators were able to throw Osiris into a coffin. Actually, how it happened is they look like they're selling a cabinet, and they're so, yeah, I think it would fit you just perfectly. And then Osiris goes into it, and they quickly covered over this cabinet and nailed it closed, and then murdered him inside of it, and then threw his body into the Nile. You know, I gotta tell you, these stories are a little bit violent. Have you noticed that yet? Anyway, so Isis was frantic and called her sister Nephthys and Anubis and Thoth to help look for him, and find him they did. But before they could revive Osiris, Seth stole his body again and dismembered him, cut him up into 14 different pieces, sprinkling his body parts all over Egypt. So Isis set about retrieving his parts and found every single part except for one, his male member. But that didn't stop Isis, and so through her magic, she created this magic phallus via her abilities, and then she became pregnant with Horus. That's how she conceived Horus in this story. In a later version, there was actually a catfish or a crab ate his male member. That's still another version. Isis fled into the marsh after her jealous brother Seth had killed Osiris, and for him impregnating his sister. And so Horus was born in the Nile Delta. In any other case, Isis now declared that Horus was the next king after her husband Osiris, but Seth contested this claim. The gods deliberated for 8 years over these different perspectives, but eventually decided on behalf of Isis, and so Seth lost the rights to all of Egypt. That's pretty much it. So meanwhile, what happens to Osiris? Well, Osiris, I feel kind of compelled. I don't know why. It's kind of cool to hold a real Osiris while talking about Osiris. I don't know why. Just it's for dramatic effect. But I'm talking about you, so yeah, I'm talking about you. So I'm going to go ahead and kind of read as I'm holding the Osiris image here. So meanwhile, Osiris went on to become the king of the underworld and the judge of the living and the dead. Already by the end of the 5th dynasty, Osiris had become this is by the already 5th dynasty, right? Osiris had become the merciful judge of the underworld, described as, get this, described as the Lord of Love. Wow. And the one who was permanently benign and youthful. Osiris was there to help the pharaoh in the afterlife, while according to the pyramid text, the goddess Isis was there to help as well. He was also associated with as I mentioned, the growing power behind vegetation, for he was of the earth and could use his powers to make that which grows upon it more fertile. Yet every year, as I said, the vegetation would die, yet through the life-giving waters of the Nile, that which was dead would be resurrected, revived. It was believed that Osiris was connected with this dying and then rising vegetation, and so was possessed with the ability to rise again from death itself. By the time of Mentuhotep II, the pharaohs believed that through sympathetic magic, they could actually become Osiris themselves after death. They could become through sympathetic magic. And so via this god of the underworld could have the power to rise again to a new life following their death. But the new kingdom, this resurrection connection to Osiris, was believed to be available to all Egyptians from, of course, when this particular image arises from. This is a new kingdom piece. So it's only 3,000 years old. Just throw it over here as a joke. I'm very careful with it. Okay, so as for the knowledge of specific kings active in the pre-dynastic period, we have a few. So let's go back to some images. We'll see some images for a while, just for a little bit. Okay, this is a great image. Once again, this is, you see Horus and Seth. and they're giving the power to Pharaoh. Let's go to the next image. That's a really great image. Okay, so this is Osiris. So, and you can see he resembles in many ways the Osiris that you just saw in my hand. The hat is the same. The arms, the flail, the cough, they're all the same. It's the same one. Let's go to the next image. That's a great image. I love it. Beautiful image. This is I love this. This is Osiris and Isis together, and so they're looking at each other. The two loved ones that they are, and as I said before, he is the fertile soil, but she is the magic. He has the potential within the soil itself for life. So he in a sense is pregnant with that potential, but it takes her magic to make the life come about. So life is magical. Oh, this is a great image. Go to the next one. Very good. Beautiful, beautiful. Oh, love this one too. You can see the two together, and there is an affection. You know, they are the Egyptian lovers. The Egyptian society, I got to tell you, they did believe quite a bit in love, and they're pretty passionate in their various writings. They do, and you'll see other images beyond this too. So affection was not frowned upon. Okay, next picture. Oh, here we go. So now we're going to go on to Abydos. So Abydos is one of the center areas here. Okay, so now as far as knowledge of the specific kings active in the pre-dynastic period, there is a pharaoh by the name of Irhor. And he was the earliest ruler that we know about. And we find is not much. In fact, all we know is his name and that he reigned sometime during the 32nd century BCE. Some scholars are not even sure about that much, saying that the name that features the Horus falcon with the mouth hieroglyphs in his claws simply refers to the god Horus and not to any historical royal figure. Yet we do find a tomb that has many clay objects with his name on it, from the necropolis of Abydos. Furthermore, this tomb was first of its kind and is quite large, following the configuration of many of the later royal tombs. In many ways, his name is also found on a clay seal from Narmer's tomb as well. Let's go to the next image. Oh, this is a great image of one of the tombs at Abydos. So you can see that here. Good, good. And oh, wait, this is yeah, keep going to the next one. Yeah, so if you ever have a chance to go to Abydos, please go to the next image. Okay, here it is. Here's Ihor's tomb. If you didn't believe me, there it is in writing. So, okay. So there it is. Go to the next one. It's very simple tomb. This is of course, the King Ka was also known as Sikhen, possibly following Eeyore. This king ruled from Thinis, which is located near Abydos and was the capital of a tribal confederacy in the region. Ancient sources confirm that Thinis was the location of the very first royal burial site in Egypt. Yet by the time of Ihor, although I keep wanting to say Eeyore and Ka, the kings were already being buried at Abydos. According to the 3rd century BCE Egyptian historian Manetho, Thinis was also where the great king Menes came from, understood by many Egyptologists as a king after Ka that united Egypt. While Thinis was the capital of Egypt, Abydos evolved into the religious center for the Egyptians and so became viewed as a more appropriate place to bury the dead. By the way, Thinis, even though it shows on the map earlier, is a lost city and to this date has never been fully discovered. And then beginning later on by the 3rd dynasty, then Memphis becomes the uncontested capital of Egypt. Let's go to the next image. All right, there we go. This is Narmer's tomb here. And you see the next one after that of his son, Hor-Aha. So let's talk about means a little bit though. Let's go to the next image so we can see a little bit what means looks like. There he is. He doesn't look too mean. So legend, of course, is means sometimes identified as Narmer, sometimes his son Orhaha is identified as means. But anyway, he was associated with uniting the kingdoms of Upper Egypt and Lower Egypt. So he is the one that brings it all together. So the realm that is connected to Seth, which is, of course, we know is Lower Egypt, with the realm that's connected to Horus, and that is Upper Egypt. Now, let's go to the next image. Oh, look at this. Oh, all right. So the early dynastic pharaohs, that's from 3050 to 2686 BCE. So basically the 3000s to the 2600s. Basically to the Old Kingdom. The pharaohs were buried actually in what's called mastabas. This is a mastaba. A mastaba is basically a rectangular shaped structure with a flat roof and having sloping sides and used for the sole purpose of burial. In ancient Egypt, these structures were called predigit, which means eternal house or house of eternity. Actually, the word mastaba means in Arabic a bench of mud. In Arabic, they're all like, we don't know what this is. It kind of does look like a bench of mud, doesn't it? Because so many of them were made out of mud bricks, although many of them were made out of stone too. The Egyptians believed the soul needed to be ritually fed, and the soul, of course, being called the Ba, but we'll go more into that details of that a little bit later here. And so the mastaba often had a doorway leading to a chapel on top, accommodating a place for various offerings of food and drink to either to be left or burned to feed the soul. The bodies were typically located far below the part of the mastaba above ground in a subterranean chamber. Let's go to the next image so you can see another mastaba. There, that's good. Usually there was one chamber reserved for the body and another one reserved for what the person required for the afterlife, including clothes, personal and precious items, wheat and other kinds of food, and of course, lots and lots of beer. This second hidden chamber was called a serdap. Eventually, a second and a third level were added to the mastaba, and this process would gradually evolve into the stepped pyramid and then into full pyramids. Can you see it? Can you see it? Look, it's the beginnings of a pyramid right there. So when the pharaoh Hor-Aha, the son of Narmer, was buried within the vast complex of the necropolis of Abydos, many members of the royal household were buried with him, including servants, many women, dwarves for some strange reason, and even some dogs. It was believed he needed their company for his journey into the next world. We are uncertain whether the servants committed mass suicide or were simply killed outright for the occasion of the ritual burial. Hor-Aha's body itself was directly buried alongside a group of young lions, which were symbols of his royalty. The burial of the staff and servants of the pharaoh continued to be the custom for the pharaohs that followed him, including Didjer, who was buried with 318 servants, we know because we found them. Digit, let's go to the next one. This is actually Digit's tomb in Abydos. Isn't that cool looking? That's Digit's tomb. They found here 174 servants were sacrificed and then buried with him right here at this spot, which you're looking at. Then the next one was Den. We go to the next picture. And this is Den's tomb. And forensic evidence proved that 136 men and women uh, died at the same time, and it appears that they were all strangled to death. And then Ajib, who was buried with 64 attendants, ritually killed to attend him in the afterlife. You guys notice something about the numbers? Yeah, they're starting to go down. Yet it is clear that the numbers of servants ritually killed are decreasing in number. So what's going on? So with the next pharaoh, his name is Semerkert, who ruled around 2920. As opposed to finding these dead bodies in these chambers to join the pharaoh in the afterlife, to serve him and to take care of him and to feed him and to clothe him, because they believe in this. We're talking about the belief system of the Egyptians. Instead of that, they found 67 additional tombs built for his servants, but it shows that they died later on. see, they went from the old days. The old days was like this. Hey, guess what? What you are? Let's go to me now. Thank you, Margie. So, what happens is kind of like, hey, when you work for Pharaoh, you work all the way through. When you sign up, it's not only for this life, it's for the afterlife. And I think what's happening is Pharaoh's getting sick. He's not looking too well. And they're thinking, maybe I need to find another job. Maybe I need to go somewhere else for employment. He's not looking too good. And I'm not looking forward to going into a chamber, having the door close, and then, either suffocating, fighting, or doing ritual suicide. So by the time we get to Semerkert, what happens is that they're allowed to live, and then later on in life, they're buried with them, 67 of them. So there you have it. So, and then with Quaa, Qaa, was the final pharaoh of the first dynasty. The custom of killing servants at the pharaoh's tombs was completely over. It was replaced by something else known as a Shabbatus figure. A Shabbatus figure. Guess what? I have a real Shabbatus figure. Yeah. This is only about 3,000 years old, but the Shabbatus figure. So what is the Shabbatus figure? I mean, what is this? Well, it's the replacement for the servants. You got to have something. I mean, somebody's got to serve Pharaoh. You don't have the servants being thrown into the tomb. What happened is they made these. Now, they were first, this is obviously New Kingdom. They were first a little bit, quite a bit larger, to be honest. Shabbatus was intended to act as a substitute for those who were sacrificed before, to perform on their behalf as loyal servants for Pharaoh in death. And the name Shabbatus or Shabbati means answerer. And so they were ready to perform whatever manual tasks that were asked of them. In essence, reanimated as soon as their king and they were all alone in the tomb, they suddenly came alive and they performed those acts of servitude. At first, the Shabbatus, they had life-size heads made out of limestone, but eventually they became smaller in size. And even mere figurines that are 5 to 10 inches high. This is one. You can see this is okay. They're usually shaped like mummies. You can see that. Often with a headdress. Yeah, you see that too. Headdress, right? And often carrying a basket on their backs and a hoe. The Shabbatus did have the power. They did actually have power, but what gave them the power, was a name that was inscribed in the back. It is the name of the pharaoh. Now, obviously, as time goes on, other people want Shabbatus figures, so it's not only exclusive to Pharaoh. So you put that name on there, and this will seal it. Now, the problem with this one is, look at this. You see what's left of the cartouche? Somebody rubbed it off, but you can still see where it used to be. So they took the guy's name off of it. because they wanted to use it again during the Iron Age for other things, magic. So that's why it's like a voodoo doll. It has all the holes in it. See it? Ooh, okay. Okay. So the Shabbatus figures. The Shabbatus did have what basically the Shabbatus, they came back to life. The Shabbatus figure was said to, there's actually a little story here in the Book of the Dead, and I'll just read it real quick. The Shabbatus says in the 6th chapter for the Book of the Dead, stating, illumining the Osiris, whose word is truth, hail Shabbatus figure. If the Osiris, and then you fill in your name there, name of the deceased, be deceased to do any of the work which is to be done by Kurt Netter, let everything which standeth in the way be removed from him, whether it be plow in the fields, or to fill the channels with water, or to carry sand from the east to the west. And then it says, the Shabbatus figure, I will do verily. I am here when thou callest. They are answerers. So, yeah. So, I got to tell you, I've had this for eons. It's done nothing for me. No offense. No offense. I would like it to do my household chores. Wouldn't that be nice? But, I leave the messy house, come back, and still messy. The Shabbatus is kind of looking at me like, what? What do you expect me to do? You're supposed to be dead, okay? Then I'll clean your house. Okay, well, let's not go that far. All right, so we move on. We probably should. So remember that Den, remember who ruled around 2930? He was considered one of the greatest pharaohs of the early dynastic period. Let's go back to the pictures for just a few moments. And is first to be shown wearing the double crown. So let's go to the next one. Yeah, there. Yes. Oh, I guess, well, keep it there. Okay. One red. So Den is the first to have the wearing the double crown. One red and the other white, representing Lower and Upper Egypt, respectively. Now, Den was a worshiper of the goddess that you're seeing right here. And her name is Seshat. Seshat or Seshat. So Seshat or Seshat, and he actually set up an image of her. Who is Seshat? Seshat was, you're going to love this, was the ancient goddess of wisdom. She was the ancient goddess of knowledge and the ancient goddess of writing, with her name meaning she who is the scribe. In fact, she was often credited for inventing writing in the first place. Seshat was also the official sacred scribe of the Egyptian pantheon, constantly keeping detailed records about everything. She was known as a goddess of anything that happened to be frequently written down as important, and so became known as the goddess of history. She was a goddess of architecture and building and surveying, of astronomy, mathematics, and any other intellectual field that needed to be written down in order to be fully understood. Wow. I love this title. She was often called the mistress of the House of Books, with her priests overseeing the sacred archives and libraries of various kinds all over Egypt. Here in her holy depositories of knowledge, important scrolls were produced, stored, and used by those who required her information. Her main shrine was the Heliopolis. Let's go to the next image. I think I have another one of her. Yeah, there she is. That's great. Love it. Love it. Seshat was always depicted as a woman in human form and is frequently portrayed with a 7-pointed emblem above her head. Egyptologists are uncertain what this means. We're not sure. Also, this goddess usually holds a palm stem marked up by notches that are intended to represent the fact that she records the passage of time, again emphasizing her connection to history. More specifically, she kept track on how long each pharaoh rules. And so they were well aware that she was the one who knew how long they were to remain in power. She knew. So they sought to honor her with hopes that it would be a very long and very successful reign filled with her wisdom. Seshat not only helped inspire Pharaoh's speeches, but also actually wrote them, especially his crowning ceremony speech. She wore either leopard or cheetah skins. These hides are often connected with priests who observe funerary practices. Perhaps spell 10 of the coffin text is connected to this association, where it declares, Seshat opens the doors of heaven for you. Oh, beautiful. Thank you so much, Margie. So beyond working as a definitive sacred scribe, Seshat was also known as the divine measurer, and in this capacity is shown holding a knotted cord that was used by surveyors to mark out the measurements for her foundations of various buildings. Seshat was called for what's called the stretching of the cord rituals, especially when the pharaoh would dedicate buildings and sites considered sacred to the gods. But of course, this doesn't have a happy ending. Gradually, the moon god Thoth became increasingly more connected to wisdom, and suddenly she found herself demoted to be his daughter. And with many of her lower level priestesses expected to serve both her and Thoth. And then eventually, I'm sorry, Seshat then becomes Thoth's wife. You're wondering, when is this happening? Did you guys know that much of Egyptian society wasn't necessarily patriarchal at first? It had more of an egalitarian stance. And that continued into the Middle Kingdom. Old Kingdom, Middle Kingdom. When does it change? When the Hyksos arrived during the Second Intermediate Period, which of course are from the areas of what is now, of course, the Near East, the Middle East. When they come, these Semitic peoples, oftentimes believed to be with the Habaru, they bring a strong patriarchy with them, and so when the New Kingdom starts, that is patriarchal. Also, the Hyksos bring this new institution to Egypt, and that's called slavery. Before that, the Egyptians typically did not have slaves; they had contracted laborers. So your things are changing quickly, right? So there you have it. So you got a new goddess that you want to know about. Okay, now the founder of the second dynasty of Egypt was named Hotep Sikmini, who ruled between 25 to 29 years, with the name meaning two powers are reconciled, suggesting that a conflict had just been diverted, most likely between Upper and Lower Egypt, represented by Horus and Seth. Egyptologists have found some evidence related to this momentary conflict. So we have seen this. Ruling around, here we go, 2740 BC, the second king was named Ra-Nip. Now, Ra-Nip, which has some importance because it is written using the hieroglyphic sign of the sun. So let's go to the images real quick. So, so okay, so okay. Oh, this is actually Hotep Sekmi. There he is. That's what he looks like. Let's go to the next one. Okay, so this is Ra-Nip. This is his cartouche, and you can see here. It's like, well, is this the sun? Is this the indication that? So this particular name is written using the hieroglyphic sign of the sun. You can see it right there. Now, the name can be translated two ways. It can either say, Ra is my Lord, or it could say, Lord of the Sun. And it cannot be any more exact unless we knew the context. If it does refer to Ra, this is important. You see, up until this point, there is no evidence, drum roll please, for a sun cult in Egypt. What? I know. When we typically think of Egypt, we think of Ra, right? Don't we? Right? But during this period, it was not Ra, but Horus and Seth that dominated much of Egyptian religion, playing upon the inherent dualism between the two. Still, we will have to wait until the reign of King Dozer in the third dynasty for any more definitive evidence for a developing sun cult that was specifically connected to Ra. So at first, let's go to the next image. That's great. Thank you. At first, Ra was specifically associated with the midday sun, but eventually became connected to all the phases of the sun throughout the day. As the god of the sun, he was connected to light and warmth, and of course, the growth of the vegetative world. Ra traveled on two boats. The first was known as the Manjit. That's a great name. It's the boat of 1,000,000 years. Or of course, this is the morning boat for his journey across the sky. And then on the evening, he rode on a boat known as the Masketit, as he traveled below the earth into the underworld, where he faced the mighty serpent dragon Apophis, who he defeated and emerged once more into the realm of light. So let's go to the next image. This is King Djoser. It makes you want to kind of fall asleep, doesn't it? Djoser. 2686. He was a founder of the third dynasty, and more importantly, was also the pharaoh who established what is called the Old Kingdom, which stretched from 2686 to 2181. King Djoser is most famous for the step pyramid at Saqqara. Let's go to the next image. There it is. What does that look like? Come on. That looks like a mastaba, doesn't it? It certainly does. Oh, you're learning the evolution just on sight of the pyramid. So we know it's no aliens designed this pyramid. The architect was also the high priest. His name is Imhotep. And he was connected to the construction of this stepped pyramid. For some reason, Imhotep decided to put a second and smaller mastaba on top of the first one that was a little smaller. And then he decided to put a third on top of the second, and then a fourth on top of the third, and finally a fifth mastaba, the smallest of the rest on top, all at the very top there. In total, Djoser's pyramid towered 62 meters or 203 feet into the heavens. In this way, one of the most important architectural features of the Old Kingdom began to evolve. And you can see the area below the pyramid was a maze of corridors and chambers with one shaft going 28 meters from the surface directly down to Djoser's tomb that was sealed with a plug. And this stone that weighed 3.5 tons. Of course, such a monumental structure of stone would be quite labor intensive, as you could imagine. And of course, in contrast to the earlier structures raised by the previous pharaohs, which are often made out of mud brick. Okay, we can stop for right now. Thank you so much, Margie. But Djoser was able to secure enough resources and manpower enough through his strong centralized rule and his conquest that the building was possible. But what in the world does the pyramid represent? Already you're realizing, we're not going to go with the alien theory. So the answer to this question is one of gradual progression of meaning as time passes, with different beliefs connected with these structures depending upon who was viewing them at the time. From the archaeological evidence, the evolution appears to start with the mastaba tombs becoming more and more grandiose, and then a decision by Djoser to make his final resting place even more magnificent by placing a series of mastabas on top of one another, and thereby, of course, creating the step pyramid. We know that the shape of the pyramid came to represent, later on, the descending rays of the sun. But this concept would not be relevant with the step pyramid, but only with the true pyramids later on, with its covering of highly reflective limestone. The pyramid was also believed to represent the primordial mound from which the entire universe emerged. And the pyramid texts from the 5th dynasty and the 6th dynasty elaborate upon this myth, So there is evidence for it. Yes. But the question must be asked if this is relevant to the beginning of the third dynasty. So, now maybe it's connected to, of course, Ra, right? Maybe it's connected, but it looks like, however, looking at this, we can be sure about that at first, before all these layers of mythological interpretations are added onto the pyramid, we can be sure that because it's evolving from a mastaba, that it was associated with the dead, and was intentionally designed to house the remains of pharaohs and members of his household, which we have found. Not their actual remains, but sometimes we have, but the chambers. They were also constructed on the west side of the Nile, again associated with the realm of the dead and the afterlife, for it was the place of the setting sun. While calling them maybe resurrection machines may be a bit too far, the evidence does seem to support that first the mastaba and then the pyramid was connected with resurrection from the very beginning, and we'll go into that evidence a little bit later. Furthermore, many Egyptologists like Mark Lerner state that the ancient Egyptian word for pyramid was Mer, which translates as a place that is the shadow, or the shadow of a long past, patiently waiting for the future, or it can mean another interpretation is a place of ascension, a place of ascension. So, but here's the point I want to bring up. People will say, hey, there's no evidence for pyramids being mentioned in ancient Egypt. Nobody talks about them. Well, nobody's going to call them pyramids. That's a Greek word. Herodotus talks about that. They went around, these Greek tourists, or hey, that looks like a pyramid. Like those little sweets that we try with has like the apple interiors. Yummy. It's like a pastry. No, I'm sorry. Maybe there's because they had the stories of this place being the places of the bakers of the various breads and so forth. But the point of the matter is this: we have the name. They're called Mers, and that's what they're called. And so we discover that there's Mers described all the time. We know all about the pyramids. Just use the Egyptian word for it. Okay. So not much is known about Dozer's successor, Semekhet, and who left his own step pyramid at Saqqara. Why? What's going on now? Well, now everybody wants to have a step pyramid. The mastabas are out. The step pyramid, and it becomes like, hey, can I make my mastaba or step pyramid taller than yours? Oh, this is awful. So, and then of course you're going to have. We can't. There's other ones too. There's some who start out trying to make a pyramid, but they that seems to be they start but they don't finish. So we have these pyramids that are not completed yet that are step pyramids. But I would say the next step in the evolution of the pyramid, did I say step? I did. Is to go from a step to a non-step. And who's going to do that? Did you know that there's one pharaoh that's associated with making 3 pyramids? 3. Let's go to the pictures. His name is Sneferu. And always picture, this pharaoh wearing a pharaonic hat. Yes. So Sneferu made these 3 pyramids during his reign. So when people say, oh, you can't build these pyramids, it takes too long. This guy made 3 of them. Let's go there. So let's go to he's credited. Let's go here. So first of all, he's credited, Sneferu is credited as the first 4th dynasty pharaoh of Egypt. He reigned around 2600 BCE. He is famous for building 3 pyramids at a place called Dahsur, located west of the Nile, about 40 kilometers south of Cairo. The first was the Bent Pyramid. Let's go to the next picture. This is the Bent Pyramid. This pyramid reveals trial and error attempts by the pharaoh to make a true monumental pyramid. The bent pyramid first rises from the desert at a 54-degree inclination. Do you see that? But then suddenly proceeds to a shallower angle of 43 degrees towards the very top, making the pyramid literally bent. What happened was that Sneferu, or I should say his architect, made the angle too sharp, and so the pyramid became structurally unstable. And so the angle had to be modified at the end so that it would not collapse. I'm sorry. Unlike most of the other pyramids, amounting to about 90 at last count, the bent pyramid is unique in that it retains the majority of its smooth polished limestone, the outer casing there, which are typically looted for other buildings throughout the centuries. But apparently, nobody wanted this one. Don't get your nose, bent out of shape. Nose bent out of shape. Okay. Well, hey, Sneferu thought it was funny. So let's go to the next one. The second pyramid. Oh no, it's another disaster. Do you see it? The second pyramid was the median pyramid, which is built around the same time as the bent pyramid, and was another failed experiment. For in this case, the architect first built a step pyramid and then changed his mind and decided to create a true pyramid by filling in the steps with limestone encasing. But this fill was made out of sand rather than rocks, and so the outer casing did not have the stability to hold them in position. And so these stones simply, collapsed. Most Egyptologists agree that it collapsed while it was still under construction and never completed. Look, you can see the mess, the ruin of the rest of the pyramid sitting around it. I know it's like we were always arguing about the evolution of the pyramid, and they're thinking, hey, people are also talking about they just come out of nowhere. Look, we're seeing the trial and errors. Sneferu, are you going to help us? Yes, he makes the third pyramid. Here it goes. Next one. Thank you, Margie. Next one. Yeah. Yes, there it is. Well, the first and second pyramids built by the pharaoh Sneferu were failures. The third and final pyramid was known as the Red Pyramid. It achieved the true pyramid status and so was a complete success. It is the third largest in Egypt, second only to the pyramids of Khufu and Khafra at Giza. Now, learning the lessons from the bent pyramid, while the upper section of the bent pyramid were modified to a 43-degree angle from a 54 angle on top to make a pyramid more stable, the architect decided to make the entire Red Pyramid a 43-degree angle. And unlike the other two pyramids, it still stands 344 feet today. Which is pretty good. 344 feet. Let's put it this way: the Great Pyramid is 481 feet, 344 feet, 481 feet. We know aliens didn't make this one, so aliens didn't make the next one. It's trial and error. You see, they're ready to take the next step, which brings us, of course, to the next pyramid. There it is. Now, for fun, Margie, that's the Great Pyramid. Now go back to the Red Pyramid, just for fun. Do you see the connection? Okay, go back to the other one. Sorry. You see it, right? Same idea, just a little bigger, This Khufu, also known as Cheops, reigning from 2589 to 2566. These dates are just approximate. He's most famous for his Great Pyramid of Egypt, which is considered one of the seven wonders of the ancient world, even though the Red Pyramid is only, is not that much shorter. But anyway, the Great Pyramid rises a staggering 481 feet, and was the tallest structure in the world for 3,800 years until the completion of the Lincoln Cathedral in England around 1300. The Great Pyramid requires an unusual round-the-clock labor force to build it in only 20 years. It's estimated to weigh 5.9 million tons. Since there's about 2.3 million blocks, 12 blocks weighing between 25 to 80 tons would have to be placed into the structure every hour, day and night for 20 years. The entire Great Pyramid was covered with smooth white limestone blocks. But there was some problems. Around 1300, a massive earthquake loosened these blocks. Then the stones were removed over a period of time, starting with Nasir Hassan in the year 1356, and it was used to build various structures in Cairo, including various mosques. Yes, and it was built day and night using two gangs of 100,000 men each. Each of these gangs were divided into 5 zahs of 20,000 men each. Then subdivided from there, the Great Pyramid has 3 main inner chambers called the Grand Gallery, the King's Chamber, and the Queen's Chamber. So there you have that. So let's. I'll just show you the whole complex. Then we'll go back to talking. So there's the whole complex there. So we'll be talking about that briefly, and then we'll be going on from there. Okay, thank you, Margie, so much. Now, one of the most interesting parts about a story is Khufu emerges from what's called the Papyrus Westcar, dating from the Middle Kingdom, where Egyptologists are divided on exactly how to interpret it in relation to Pharaoh's personality. The story goes as follows. It is narrated by his Khufu's son and next pharaoh, Djedefre, where he tells his father, Khufu, about a miracle worker in the kingdom. So we're kind of going into, again, localized beliefs. So let's look into this localized belief of a miracle worker. I'm going to be reading from the source. Why not? I like this story. It's kind of weird. He states, there's a commoner named Dedi. He lived in Djedefre. It's interesting that he lived in a place that was named after that other pharaoh who built those pyramids. He's a simple citizen, but he's 110 years old. He eats 500 loaves of bread, a shoulder of beef, and drinks 100 jars of beer every day. That's a lot. 500 loaves of bread, a shoulder of beef, and 100 jars of beer every day at 110. I don't know. It just seems like a little much to me. Maybe a little gluttonous. I don't know. He is capable of resurrecting decapitated beings. He is also said to be able to make wild lions so obedient that the animals would follow him with a cord dragging on the ground. Furthermore, this Dedi has knowledge of the numbers of Ipsit and Winnit sanctuary of Thoth. Hearing his son's words, Khufu agrees that he should send for him so that he may be in his presence. So Djedefre finds the elderly magician, who apparently eats quite a bit and drinks quite a bit, and tells him, your condition is equal to someone who lives from aging. I don't know if I like that. Your condition is equal to someone who lives from aging. Don't most of us live from aging? I don't know, just saying it. Maybe bad translation. And to someone who sleeps until dawn, free of illness and wheezing. Wouldn't that be great? For aging is the time of dying, the time of the preparing of the burial, and the time of being buried. This is the question about the conditions of noble men. I have come to summon you in order of my father, justified that you may eat from the delicacies my father gives, the food of his followers. And then he may guide you to the ancestors which are in the necropolis now. Which I'm not sure if I like that either. It's like, yeah, you come visit Pharaoh, and then you gotta go to where why, are you gonna die? I mean, he's gonna kill you? I don't know. Then he replies, he said, welcome, welcome, Djedefre, son of the king, beloved of his father. May you be praised by your father, Khufu the Justified. May he let your place be at the front of all time-honored ones. May thine Ka successfully champion all things against any enemy. May thine Ba know the ways that lead to the gateway of the mummified deceased. So you can see the Ka and Ba being referenced. Now Dedi is brought before Pharaoh Khufu, who asked him, is it true, this talk about that you could mend severed heads? Dedi responds, yes, O sovereign, my lord. May you live and be blessed and prosperous. I know how to do that. But then Khufu orders, may a prisoner who is jailed be brought to me so that this execution may be enforced? To this order, Dedi is horrified and tells the Pharaoh, remember, this is a Middle Kingdom story about the Old Kingdom. This is a old story. He says, he tells Pharaoh, not to make a human suffer, O sovereign, my lord. May you live, be blessed and prosperous. You see, it was never allowed to do something like that on the noble flock. Instead of a human prisoner, Dedi chose to have 3 animals decapitated. 3 animals, a goose, a waterfowl, and a bull. After each was decapitated, he would place the head on the eastern side of the hall and the body on the western side, say a set of magical words, and both the head on one side and the body on the other would come to life. So basically, the head would come to life on one side and the body on the other. After that, Dedi simply reunited the 2 parts and the animals would live again. So he brought back to life. After a few more tests of the magician's power, Khufu generously rewarded him, ordering, have Dedi assigned to a place within the palace of my son Djefur, where he shall live from now on. His daily gainings be 1,000 loaves of bread. Well, okay, so he's up from 500 loaves, so he doubled that. And 100 jars of beer, and 100 bundles of field garlic. Ugh. And all things are done as ordered. Unquote. Well, what a story. Yeah. It turns out, by the way, during the time of Khufu, everybody likes garlic and beer. And so we know by the way, we have found the encampments of the laborers who built the pyramids of Khufu, as well as the other ones. Also, by the way, which is another talk which you can listen to if you want to, is that we have found a journal from that time of somebody that was involved in building these pyramids. Is this fascinating? Yeah, so there you have it. But yeah, they filmed garlic. So, of course, obviously, the other pyramids are built. We won't go through all those, but you get the idea. And the Sphinx as well. But let's move on, as we shall, to the pharaoh Userkaf. His name meaning the soul is powerful. So let's go to, actually, wait for a second. He founded the Egyptian 5th dynasty. During his reign, the sun cult related to the god Ra became more emphasized, for Userkaf was the very first ruler to build sun temples. Yeah, now let's go to some images here. So let's go to the next one. There he is. There's Userkaf. And let's take a look at his tomb. This is the next one. Oh, that's another good picture of him. Sorry. I'll go to the next one. There's his tomb. So it's kind of a hole. Not much as, it's a pyramid, but not that great a quality. You see, the quality is definitely going down. Let's go to the next one. It's not very impressive, this next picture. Yeah, it's very small too, but this is the Sun Temple. Not much is left at all. This is basically the Sun Temple, as well as others, was typically oriented toward the setting sun in the west. And so in this sense, faced the dying sun, which fit it very well with a related mortuary cult. Userkaf's high temple was constructed about a monumental obelisk. There was a raised causeway that led to this temple complex, to a rectangular valley temple located alongside the Nile River. So this is the beginning of these great mortuary temples, but also connected, in this case, to the sun. Let's go to the next one. Oh, okay. So actually, this is good. This is Hathor. This is Hathor. So Userkaf established an official cult of Hathor in Middle Egypt that was to be maintained in his royal properties located there. Before the 4th dynasty, representations of Hathor were not as refined as later on, depicted simply as a cow goddess, for example, on King Narmer's belt. Sometimes in the form of a cow, Hathor has stars on her ears and her horns, possibly indicating that she was associated with the sky and the night sky in particular. By the time of the Old Kingdom, her stellar connections became more obvious. And so, like the goddess Nut, Hathor became a representation of the Milky Way, as well as related to the spring, as well as the fall equinoxes. One inscription from the 1st dynasty calls her Hathor of the Marshes, as well as the Lady of Sycamore in other descriptions, revealing her as a vegetative goddess. Of course, Hathor's representation as a cow reveals her association with animal reproduction as well. From this evidence, we can establish that Hathor was a fertility goddess from the beginning. You can end that for a second. Yes, yes. This is Hathor. Wow. So Hathor. I'll go ahead and hold Hathor, excuse me, as I do a little bit more here. Okay, so I got some gloves on here, by the way. Hathor does not receive much in the way of emphasis until the 5th dynasty. As I said, where an official cult around her sometimes established, and she quickly is connected with another rising deity. And that is Ra, sometimes shown as his daughter, and other times his wife and his mother. Hathor also receives a very firm connection with the afterlife, for it was said that Hathor, as a mother, greeted those who were the righteous dead in Duat and laid out before them a fine meal to enjoy. As Ra's daughter, Hathor was viewed as the eye of Ra, the feminine aspect of the male god, and represented as the disk of the sun, which, of course, acts independently of Ra, but always for him, usually in a protective sense. Now, if Ra is attacked or opposed, the eye of Ra, who's connected to Hathor, right, will respond and attack or oppose accordingly. One of the main adversaries of Ra is disorder, as anything that disturbs the order he created and set upon to perpetually maintain. Now, when angered, Hathor's heat as the eye of Ra will blaze out and scorch or even completely burn those who are objects of her wrath. Let's go to an image real quick. I want to show you this. The next one here. And guess what happens? So when angered, Hathor's heat as the eye of Ra will blaze out and scorch and even completely burn those who are the object of her wrath. In one story, dating from the New Kingdom, Ra directs his eye against those who sought to rebel against him, and Hathor manifests herself as the goddess Sekhmet. And this is Sekhmet right here, and begins to massacre them, but then goes out of control, for she realizes that all humanity in some way rebels against the order that is created by Ra. To stop this bloodbath, Ra dyes some beer red so that it looked like blood and poured it all over the land. The eye of Ra, who is the goddess Hathor in her Sekhmet lion's aspect, sees the beer and, thinking it is blood, drinks it all up so that she becomes too drunk to harm anyone else. So Sekhmet is directly connected to Hathor as her wrathful aspect. And of course, I'm telling you this here. Sometimes, however, the eye of Ra was viewed as the mother aspect of Hathor, or even the goddess Nut. And in this capacity, the orb represents more than the disk of the sun, but the womb where Ra was born, and has more gentle and nurturing characteristics. As the mother of Ra, Hathor conceived the sun god every morning so that he was able to rise in the east. And so she gave birth to Ra each morning in the eastern horizon, carrying him up between her horns. As the wife of Ra, she conceives life with him throughout the day until he descends into the west. Let's go to the next image. But what is this? Because Hathor and the goddess Bat, this is Bat, or also known as Bat Hathor, the deity over musical instruments known as the sistrum, were both cow goddesses. By the Middle Kingdom, Hathor and Bat merged as one, with Hathor also becoming the goddess of the sistrum. Hathor was soon associated with another musical instrument known as the Manat, usually made out of turquoise and worn around the woman's neck. As a goddess now of music, she was next related to then dance as well. This is, we're getting the joyful aspect. Eventually, Hathor will evolve into a very popular goddess of joy and of pleasure, focused upon the realization of everyone's personal happiness. One hymn dedicated to her announced as follows: Thou art the mistress of jubilation, the queen of dance, the mistress of music, the queen of harp playing, the lady of choral dance, the queen of wreath weaving, the mistress of inebriety without end. Some of her other titles include the lady of the house of jubilation and the one who fills the sanctuary with joy. Wow, that's cool. Okay, so thank you. Actually, go to the next one. See, I think we have one more here. Yeah. Oh yes, this is actually an early image, very early image of Bot before she merges with Hathor. Let's go to the next one. That's really good. This is the Pharaoh Unas, 2375 to 2345. This is the very last ruler of the 5th dynasty. He's very important. So he's looking at you. He's staring at you. He is said to have been, basically, he's the first one to have what's called pyramid texts that are buried with him. The main purpose for the pyramid texts were to aid the pharaoh's sojourn in the afterlife through its magical spells, and so enables him to fight the forces of darkness inhabiting the underworld. Once defeated, the pharaoh then meets Ra, who by this point is a very important figure of the afterlife, where he joins his sun barge and moves across the sky. In the case of Unas, who you're seeing here, his pyramid text declares at one point, Ra Atan, this Unas comes to you, a spirit indestructible. Your son comes to you, this Unas comes to you. May you cross the sky, united in the dark. May you rise in light land, the place in which you shine. And so announced, the pharaoh's journey begins into the afterlife. There you have it. Beautiful, beautiful. Go to the next one. Thinking, okay, so what are these? Oh no. These are cannibal hymns. Cannibal hymns. Wait, what are cannibal hymns? During the time of, it's not a very impressive picture, so we'll go, I guess we'll just go back to my face. Sorry. Thanks, Martin. Okay, the cannibal hymns. The Egyptians came to believe that because the pharaoh needed special supernatural strength necessary to make his journey, he must eat the proper food even before embarking on his journey. Now, yet he cannot eat the material kind of food that he once ate in life, so he has to eat something a little different. Now, he was required to eat the food provided by the gods in the form of themselves. Wait, what? Wait. The gods are giving themselves to eat? You're going to eat the gods? Wait. Hence, cannibal hymns, even though that's kind of seems strange because, gods aren't human, but whatever. That's right. The gods actually turned themselves into sacred bulls for his own consumption, and this practice continued on, so that by eating them, he might participate in their divine powers, and so easily gain entry into the heavenly realm. One of these so-called cannibal hymns for Unas from the pyramid text declares as follows, which I actually showed you an image of that. A god who lives on his fathers, who feeds on his mothers. Unas is the bull of heaven who rages in his heart, who lives on being of every god, who eats their entrails when they come. Their body is full of magic from the Isle of Flame. These cannibal hymns may reflect an actual early royal butchery ritual performed by the priest upon the deceased pharaoh, So whoa, so you have this idea. I know it's hard to believe, but that when you consume the God, that dispensation comes upon you and perfects you enough so that you can enter into heaven. I know you've never heard of this concept ever before. Sarcasm. I just, wow, we could go here a lot on this one. Okay, now, according to the pyramid text, the pharaohs were assisted with the sacred ritual of consuming the gods by this demonic god of slaughter and execution known as Shemzu. Now, I'm sorry, Shezmu. Sorry, Shezmu. Just Margie, for a split second, let's take a look at Shezmu, see what Shezmu looks like. We got an image of Shezmu here. Shezmu, yeah, there's more. Yeah, there's Shezmu. Not a great picture, but you can see there's some knives there. Yeah, that's all for that one. That's good. That's just a poor picture. Okay, so Shezmu, this is the servant of Osiris, whose realm was the underworld, occupying an ethical space that was both light and dark, yet transcended both. Curiously, this Shezmu was the god of oil. He was the god of perfume, and yes, he was a god of red wine, especially red wine. You see, in fact, when Shezmu punished his evildoers, he typically placed their heads into his supernatural wine press and squeezed them until all their blood was drained out of their bodies. Because of this rather macabre duty, Shezmu is often known by the epithet demon of the winepress. Yet for the righteous, Shezmu offered refreshing wine upon their soul's arrival to quench their thirst. I'm not sure. I mean, he's squeezing these heads of the unrighteous in his, in his wine press. And now he's offering this wine to righteous. I'm just hoping you're not drinking the wine of those who had their heads squeezed. But that's just me. Maybe he washed his hands. Anyway, Shezmu offered this refreshing wine to help their thirst. Sometimes Shezmu was depicted with the head of a falcon, but he was just as often just looking like a man. Now, properly fed with spiritual god food, the pharaoh now began his journey. Sometimes, as noted by one text, he rises to the heavenly realm via a celestial ladder. Hail, daughter of, I'm quoting, hail, daughter of Anubis, above the hatches of heaven, comrade of Thoth, above the ladder rails, open Unis's path, let Unis pass as you would expect for the land of the Nile, other times crossing to the realm of the dead, was being ferried across. If you fail to ferry Unis, he will leap and sit on the wing of Thoth. Then he will ferry Unis to that side. So it just seems like a kind of forthwith there. Okay, so there are various hurdles along the way, and the pyramid texts are there to help the best they can. For instance, there were certain lakes in the realm of the dead that could entrap the soul. Fortunately for the pharaoh, the pyramid text provides Unis with the necessary magic words to protect him. The passage reading, "O Unis, beware the lake," to say 4 times. So basically, you're going to have to say this 4 times to avoid this lake. You say, "The power of Christ compels you." No, wait, that's The Exorcist. Sorry, that's a bad joke. The messenger, you're supposed to say this 4 times. "The messenger of your Ka have come to you. The messenger of your father have come to you. The messengers of Ra have come to you." So basically, you got to memorize that. You say that 4 times, and you're going to avoid this lake in the afterworld, and that's great. Now, according to the Egyptians, the soul will actually consist. I talked this late about it because it takes this long to have this development. So the Egyptian soul by this point will now consist of 5 parts: the Ren, R-E-N, the Shut, S-H-E-U-T, the Ib, I-B, the Ba, B-A, and the Ka, K-A. Obviously, it's not really spelled that way because they're using, the hieroglyphics. But what is the Ren? R-E-N. The Ren is that part of the soul which is connected to the person's name. It's that part of the soul that's connected to the person's name. Upon birth, when a name is given to a person, the soul becomes connected to that name. So that as long as that name is remembered, even after death, the person goes on. This name, however, needs to be protected. It does. This is why the name, when written down, is protected by being surrounded with a magical rope that is known as a cartouche to protect the name. As you can see here, you can see the remnants of a cartouche. You see how see it there? You see how, but unfortunately, you see that the name, as well as is rubbed out. So that person's name is taken out from it, but it's supposed to protect. That's why you see cartouches around the names. So if you take their name, you have their power. You don't want to do that, right? Egyptian magic. The Shut. The Shut means shadow. Was viewed as connected to the person and their soul. So you're connected to your shadow is connected to your soul. The next part is called the Ib, I-B, Ib. This was the metaphysical heart associated with the person's emotions, their thoughts, their intentions, their will. The fact it found its way into the Egyptian language. So what will happen is, excuse me, if one was feeling happiness, they were experiencing at-ib, which translates as a wideness of heart. So if you're happy, you experience a wideness of heart. Your heart is open. It's interesting because already the heart now is being connected to the emotional aspect of humanity, which will continue to, hey, guess what? Right now, right? Affairs of the heart. But if one were upset or hurt, they had a kabib, which means a truncated heart. So an open heart is happy, a truncated heart is upset or sad. This metaphysical heart was believed to continue on and was in some ways connected to the space occupied by the real heart, or at least symbolized by it, so that while all the organs were removed to embalm the body, the actual heart, for this reason, was to remain. This heart was to be examined by Anubis and other gods, and then weighed by the deity of truth known as Mot against the feather. So the heart is weighed against the feather. If the heart was light as a feather, it would pass onto the realm of bliss. But if a person was heavy-hearted on the scales, they were cast into the darkness to be swallowed by Amit, meaning, of course, Amit means soul eater or devourer, often depicted as part crocodile, part hippopotamus, or part lion. Amit was a female demon who lived near the Hall of the Two Truths, and her consumption of the person's heart did not mean the end of their existence, but simply ensured that they would be restless forever and not go on to the realm of everlasting life. She was often depicted as having living beside what's called the lake of fire. Interesting. Now, the most important parts of the soul, however, were the Ba and the Ka. The Ba is the individual's personality, that part that makes one unique, who they are specifically. Unlike the Ren, which is their name, or Shut, the shadow, or even the Ib, the heart after it's weighed, the Ba is part of you that lives on after death and is often represented as a bird with a human head. Finally, the Ka is your vital essence, that part of you that actually gives you life, and apart from which you can't live, right? Now, the god Khnum was believed to create each person's soul on a potter's wheel, and when it's done, he breathes into it the breath of life, that is the Ka, and it lives. Khnum was actually the god of the source of the Nile River, and is specifically tied to life-giving silt and clay brought down by this river. So it's connected to the clay of humanity. And that makes sense from the Egyptian context. And of course, obviously, there's connections with Osiris. So when you die, the Ka leaves the body, but through the opening of the mouth ritual, the Ba is released and permitted to join the Ka in the afterlife, creating together, combined, what is known as the Ak, which means the effective one. So you put the Ba and the Ka together, the vital essence with who you are as a person is brought together after the opening of the mouth ceremony, and the Ak comes into existence. The Ak could still visit this life and do good or bad to those who are still living, and is connected to the idea of the person's ghost too. Yet the Ak also still dwells with the physical body that is preserved. So the opening of the mouth ceremony also reanimates the body in the afterlife. The sun itself is connected with this new life. For while each day the sun is in the sky, each night it travels into the underworld known as Duat, to the realm of Osiris, where the sun, as it goes into the underworld, re-energizes the deceased with new life so it can live again. Isn't that fascinating? So a tomb of Feri, who's a nomarch from the 18th dynasty, declares, your life happening again. Without your Ba being swept away from your divine corpse, with your Ba being together with the Ak, you shall merge each day and return each evening. A lamp will be lit for you in the night until the sunlight shines forth on your breast. You shall be told, welcome, welcome into this, your house of the living, unquote. Wow. Ultimately, the Ba and the Ka of Pharaoh Unas was believed to merge with Osiris, the lord of the underworld, in aspect. The pyramid text declaring, O Unas, you have not gone dead. You have gone alive to sit on the throne of Osiris. Your scepter is in your hand, that you may give orders to the living. The handle of your lotus-shaped scepter in your hand, give orders to those of the mysterious sights, the dead. While the pharaohs would go on to Ra in a sky barge, average Egyptians did not get to ride this barge, but still had a pleasant afterlife if they were righteous. They went to this wonderful, beautiful place, and there are texts that mention the fact that when you arrive, you are met with your animal companions. That means your cat, your dog, your pheasant, your pigeon, they had those kind of animals, would meet you on the banks of the river, all excited to spend the rest of your life, or eternal life, with them. That's kind of beautiful. Anyway, so hey, Margie, let's go for a split second. Let's go over to the images. I want to show just representations of, this is a representation of a Ba. This is that's how they depict what the Ba looks like. Let's go to the next one. The next depiction is, this is what a Ka looks like above. That's how they represent the idea of the Ka. I think that was arranged. Let's go to the next one. I think that was it for that. Yeah. Okay. This one. Okay. So this image right here is the god Amun. Amun. So what happens now is, beginning in the Middle Kingdom, you have Pharaoh Menhotep II of Thebes. And what will happen is the Egyptian Middle Kingdom will start bringing in new gods that become popularized. And one of them, of course, happens to be Amun, who later on will be combined with Amun-Ra. But this is just simply Amun. Egyptologists have determined that the Egyptians did long revere Amun, but he was not universalistic at first. He is mentioned in the pyramid texts from the Old Kingdom, in the one connected to Unas in the 5th dynasty. And Amun is paired with his female consort, however, in this case. So Amun has a female consort early on that kind of disappears as time progresses. You see this early aspect of a female association. So you have Amun, and her name is Ament. They are numbered amongst the primeval gods of creation of the world, referred directly after the gods Now and Nem, the co-creators of the watery abyss. The root of the word Amen or Amun may be translated as meaning anything from what is hidden, what is not seen, what cannot be seen. And so apparently Amun and Ament were understood as the hidden power behind the primeval abyss, the hidden energy that empowered the creation of all things, while Amun was correlated as the sun that has disappeared below the horizon, as well as the unseen wind. He occupied a realm that was beyond the physical. In fact, Amun was such a mystery, so beyond comprehension, that he was declared in various hymns hidden to his children. You can stop the image there. Thank you, Margie. And even hidden to gods and men, so that he was, in essence, the unknown God who fashioned the universe. When represented, Amun was shown with the head of a frog, while his consort Amet had the head of a uraeus. But when he had the head of a uraeus, then his consort had the head of a cat. Those of Thebes tended to combine the invisible creator god Amun with that of the sun god Ra, and eventually they'll come together as Amun Ra. But this happens in the Middle Kingdom. So the Old Kingdom, you have Amun having a consort. It's a balance between the masculine and the feminine. We get into the Middle Kingdom, and he starts to stand on his own, and then all of a sudden he's being connected more and more with Ra. Got it? Interesting to me as well. Okay, so we also, of course, have these ideas of Atum. Atum is A-T-U-M, who was believed to arise from the primordial ocean. So here's another mythological story, creation story that's coming about. It's even though some aspects are Old Kingdom, most of it is Middle Kingdom. Okay, and the story goes as follows: Atum arose from the primordial ocean, and he began to generate the world. But just how he did this varies from legend to legend and from time to time. In one version, Atum first created the god Shu, the personification of the air, and the goddess Tefnut, the personification of the water or moisture. And through various means, sometimes spitting them out of his mouth, sometimes he sneezes and Shu and Tefnut come about. Shu, Tefnut. And even, how do we say that? He, does himself. He makes them that way. In the latter version, however, where he generates it himself, Atum's hand that does that represents his female aspect that is then capable of generation. And so this god really is both male and female in aspect, for both are within him. Atum's spittle or semen then creates the gods who would continue in making the world. As for the reason why Atum created the world, many Egyptians believed it was because he was lonely and he wanted company. Unfortunately for him, his children, Shu and Tefnut, were both too curious to stay close to their parents and left Atum and traveled all the way around through the primordial ocean. And so he felt lonely again. So Atum generated and sent out what was known as the Eye of Ra to find them. He's looking for his children who disappeared because he's so lonely. Fortunately, the Eye of Ra found Shu and Tefnut and brought them back into his presence. Atum was so happy to see them again. He was so happy, so full of joy. His eyes were filled with tears. And these tears then became the first humans. So, according to this legend, we are the tears of Atum. That's how he came about. We are, in a sense, this joy, which I think is a really cool kind of story, right? Now, there's another creation story that pops up at this time at Heliopolis. And you still have the same idea. Atum rises a mound upon the primordial oceans and generates Shu, the god of air, and Tefnut, the goddess of water. Next, Shu and Tefnut copulate and produce the earth god by the name of Geb. And the sky god Nut. Gib and Nut then had 4 children. The first child was Osiris, god of generation. The second child was Isis, goddess of life, magic, and rebirth. The third child was Set, god of chaos. And the fourth child was Nephthys, symbolizing the process of dying, but also protection. In a sense, while Isis represented the process of gaining life, Nephthys was the opposite force, representing Nephthys as a process of dying. Yet she is a process of dying in a kindly way, acting as a nurturing nurse as life gradually passes away. So this is kind-hearted Nephthys. So she's not looked at as a negative force. She's looked at as a positive force that when you die, it will be an easy and happy death. The pyramid texts state it well by proclaiming, ascend and descend. Descend with Nephthys. Sink into the darkness with the night bark. Ascend and descend. Ascend with Isis. Rise to the day bark. So there you have it. So we do have an image of Nut that we will show. Margie, thank you. Can you show Nut? So yeah, this is great. Oh, let's keep going. That's another. Okay. So let's actually keep going. I don't know. Yeah, that was Nut earlier, but I want to quickly go to this one right here. So Nut was sometimes the sky god Nut was depicted nude and often appears with her body covering the sky. You see that here, with legs and feet on the ground. Sometimes Shu, the god of the air, holds her up in the middle. Yi, of course, as the earth reclines beneath her. Nut has her hair dress, a pot that most people believe the pot represents the uterus. At times, rather than a human, Nut is shown in the guise of a cow covering the heavens. According to the myth of Ra and Nut, the sun god was fearful that Nut would have children. Yeah, so Ra was afraid, because then he would have possible rivals to his throne. Got to watch these deities. So he decreed that Nut shall not give birth any day of the year. At that time, the year only had 360 days, and so Nut was only bound to that set number of days. And so she put together a plan with Thoth, the god of wisdom, to work around Ra's edict. Thoth noticed that Khonshu, who's the god of the moon, liked to gamble. He also noted that this moon god wasn't very good at gambling. So Thoth set up a game whereby if Khonshu lost, he had to give up some of the light that he used to illuminate himself as the moon. Khonshu kept on losing to Thoth, and so eventually Thoth had enough light in his possession to create 5 more days, making 365 days a year. Taking advantage of this adjustment, Nut produced 5 more children during those 5 days, giving birth to Osiris, Horus, Set, Isis, and Nephthys. When Ra found out he had been tricked, he was angry and forced Nut to stay away from Gib for all eternity, but it was too late to undo what she had set forth. Nut's father, Shu, god of the air, was entrusted with the job to keep those 2 lovebirds apart. Yes, you can stop the image now. Thank you so much, Margie, for doing that. So, according to Egyptian mythology, Osiris used a ladder to enter the skies and so eventually to escape. Osiris declared, "O my mother Nut, stretch yourself over me that I may be placed amongst the imperishable stars which are in you, and that I may not die." Because Nut was believed to have saved Osiris, and through him offer possible salvation for others who believed in him, she became connected to rituals related to the afterlife, with her ladder depicted on various tombs. Accordingly, the righteous souls of those who died would be drawn into her heavenly realm, where she relieved their hunger and thirst, as I said before, with food and wine. She told the righteous souls I am Nut, and I have come so that I may enfold and protect you from all things that are evil. Now, the Memphis creation story is completely different, uh, whereby there is Ta, PTA, who was the master craftsman that also created and molded the world. Yet this Ta, his creation of the world, was not through physical activity. This is important. He created the world, Ta created this world, according to the Memphis creation story, through his thoughts. Does that sound familiar? He created the world through his thoughts. Ta thought of creation in his mind, and then in his heart, and then he spoke what he thought and what he felt, and through the power of words, it was created. He eventually transforms into the creator God per excellence, becoming the inspiration for craftsmen and shipmakers and sculptors and metalworkers and carpenters. All about the city of Thebes, craftsmen set up stele dedicated to Ta to help them with their creative endeavors, sometimes even chiseling actual ears on the steles themselves so that Ta could hear their prayers better. Ta was known by the epithet, the ear that hears. Ta was often shown as a bearded man wearing a skull cap and shrouded like a mummy, with his hands holding an ankh and a digit. So there you have that story. Now we're going to move on to the Book of the Dead. Well, in fact, we'll talk about the Book of the Dead and a few other things. I know our time is getting a little shorter, but let's see some images. So Marjorie, let's see some images of the Book of the Dead and see what it looks like here. So let's keep going there. There is an actual image of the Book of the Dead. Let's go to the next one. Yes. So the Egyptian Book of the Dead became a very popular text by the beginning of the New Kingdom, describing the journey of the soul after death, yet also revealing that the barrier between life and death was tenuous at best. For if one followed the correct formula, life simply continued on as before in the hereafter. At first, the Book of the Dead was inscribed on the coffins of the more wealthy, and so are called coffin texts for that reason. But later on, the Book of the Dead was written on papyrus and then placed directly onto the sarcophagi or coffin, or more equally distributed amongst the rich and poor alike. The Book of the Dead are not known exactly for their uniformity, often simply a collection of texts that lack a strong sense of organization. Basically, the Book of the Dead gathered together various subjects and magical spells regarding the afterlife and were sometimes beautifully illustrated, as you can see here. The papyrus versions were often custom made for their owners, with places left open so that whoever was to own the text could just fill in their names to personalize them. So it's kind of like ad libs, just kind of put your name in there. They're blank otherwise. The most important part of the Book of the Dead was the spells that enabled the deceased to cross safely into the underworld. Now, when a person died, they were required to awake. Then they were required to read the spells and then to memorize them. So let's see the next image here. There's another image there. Yeah, there's another one. So this is more of a small personalized one that sometimes they would even put them within the wrappings of the body. So thank you, Margie, for that. That's great. Thank you so much. So basically, you got homework. You're dead. You're ready to go to the afterlife, and it's like, no, you got to stay, because you now got to go ahead and read. You gotta read these coffin texts. You gotta read the Book of the Dead. You gotta memorize the spells. You got homework. I know. It's like, you don't want to have homework. You had homework in life. So basically, a person if successful, all right, if they memorized everything correctly. So this basically, you got a test, right? If successful, the gods, demons, and spirits of the underworld would be properly pleased, repulsed, and appeased via the selection of power words so that the soul may reach the weighing of the heart ceremony before the king Osiris and Ma'at, who is, of course, the goddess of truth. Anubis, the jackal-headed god, was the deity assigned to the actual holding the person's heart, as we talked about, and placed them upon the scales of judgment. And of course, as I said, it was put upon the scale here. So what will happen now is that is that the next, the Book of the Dead has been democratized. Everybody's using this, and the wealthy people are saying, "Well, we got to come up with something even better. We got to up the ante, so to speak. So we're going to have our own special Book of the Dead that the commoners don't have anymore." And that's, of course, known as the Onduit. Okay, so what is the Onduit? Okay, it goes as follows. It really literally means that which is in the underworld. That's what it means. While the earliest evidence we have of this book comes from the time of Amenhotep I, the most complete version we have is from the tomb of Thutmose III, a later pharaoh of the same dynasty. Unlike the Book of the Dead, the magic formulas of the Onduit follow a basic pattern, and also like in the Book of the Dead, this book was mostly found in tombs of the pharaohs, of priests and relatives of both groups, and not in the grave of commoners. Basically, this work describes in detail the journey of the sun god Ra through the underworld just after the sun sets in the west to just before the sun rises in the east. Of course, the pharaoh was believed to make the very same journey after he died, joining Ra's celestial barge, so that the book also marked out the pharaoh's journey after death as well. Now, the underworld is portrayed as divided into 12 parts, each one representing one of the hours of the night. The purpose of the Onduit is to learn the name. You got to learn the name of each god and each monster in each one of the 12 underworld realms, so that when Ra, along with Pharaoh, encounters them, he can call upon the name of the god specific to that region to help him, and call upon the name of the monster specifically to defeat them. The magic of having one's name can be invoked as well as to repel, to bring assistance, or potentially destroy. So it is the power of giving a name. So as you go down, you got, okay, I need help from, this is the god that's in charge of this region. I got his name. Hey, help me out. And that's the name of the demon or the monster that's in this realm. I'm going to say that word, and you, the god's going to help me defeat them. And this is what happens going all the way through. I'm going to tell you exactly more on this. The first hour of the night is a time of transition. So when Ra, as the sun descends into the western horizon, known as Akhet. In the second hour, Ra encounters the watery world called Worms. This realm of water continues into the third hour, where he encounters the waters of Osiris. The fourth region of the underworld is the fourth hour, is the desert regions of the god Sokar, the hawk deity. Now, Ra has to navigate a treacherous zigzag path as he drags upon his snake boat upon the sand. In the fifth hour, the sun, this is important, the sun reaches the very bottom, the tomb of Osiris, which is covered, get this, the Onduit says, this tomb of Osiris is covered by a giant pyramid-shaped mound. Kind of puts the idea of the pyramid and the sacred mound together in the Onduit. Pretty cool. And this particular pyramid-shaped mound is declared as Isis covering Osiris. Isis with resurrection. And you can see the pyramid association with resurrection leaking into the Amduit. Over the summit of the pyramid, which is called a Mer, Isis and Nephthys fly about as two kites, which are Egyptian birds of prey. Beneath this tomb lies the great lake of fire for those who done wrongdoing. During the 6th hour, the soul of Ra, called in this text the Ba, united with his body, it happens to correspond to the precise moment it is believed that the sun begins its regeneration. So it may return to the realm above. So as we're going in to the 6th hour, now the energy is building up. In another version, Ra, as the sun reunites with Osiris within a magic circle created by the serpent. That's a whole other story. Yet the journey is far from over. For in the 7th hour awaits the great serpent Apophis, also known as Apep, to destroy him. The only way for Ra to defeat Apophis is through the magic of Isis and the power of Set. But Set himself needs to be helped by Serqet. From his tomb, the pharaoh Thutmose III is shown as fighting alongside the gods and goddesses to defeat Apet, the great serpent of chaos. By doing so, of course, they clear the way for the sun to rise again the next day. The rebirth of the sun was obviously tied into the resurrection of the pharaoh himself. Apophis was often described as the great serpent or the great dragon, who is the deified representation of darkness. Also fought against Mot, the deification of light and truth, so they fight against each other. But his main opponent was indeed, of course, Ra, the god of the sun, attempting to thwart his journey through the underworld so he would not rise again to give the upper world his life-giving light. Well, of course, this Apophis was often shown as waiting to attack Ra and his entourage at the 10th region of the night, just before the dawn. In some versions, he waited instead on the 1st region of the night where the sun sets, hiding behind the western mountain known as Baku. So there's various versions of this story. So let's go quickly to the image of this. So let's see here. So, okay, so we're looking at right here. This is the Anduit now. It's a little brighter. That's great. I love that. Great to see that. Next picture. That's the Anduit. That's what we're talking about. There's another image of the Anduit, and you can see, I could see the image of the Ba right there on either side. I'll go to the next one. Another image of the Anduit. Oh, that's great. The next one. Oh, there's Apophis. See Apophis, the snake? Yeah, so there it is. Just how Apophis was condemned to be such a terror of the underworld is disputed by various legends, with some Egyptians believing he was the previous supreme god, but was overthrown by Ra and condemned to go below, much like Zeus had condemned Kronos in Greek mythologies. Others contend that Apophis was condemned to the underworld because of some wicked action against the other gods. Typically, Apophis locked his eyes upon Ra and his followers moving along their night barge and hypnotizes them as he cut off the river of the underworld with his coils. You can see his coils right there. Second, Mot assisted sometimes Apophis. Occasionally, Apophis enters into the upper world and actually swallows Ra. Did you know that? Yeah, Apophis gets out, swallows Ra. This, of course, is on the occasion of the solar eclipse. Egyptian priests compose a special ritual work known as the Book Overthrowing Apep to help Ra and the other gods. And so we actually, I'm going to go ahead and read from this book. Spitting upon Apep, defiling Apep with the left foot, taking a lance to smite Apep, fettering Apep, taking a knife to smite Apep, putting fire upon Apep. It's kind of repetitious. So there, the word also instructs how one should make wax models of Apophis, and then through sympathetic magic, ritually kill or at least wound Apophis via spitting, mutilating, or burning the image. If not wax, a drawing of the serpent Apophis would suffice, and then you just kind of destroy that. Sometimes Apophis is connected with Amit or Mot, who is connected with swallowing the souls after the weighing of the heart ceremony. So you have these interesting connections there. Thank you for showing that. Very good. Thank you so much. We're going to be wrapping up pretty soon. I'm going to be talking about 2 more things, and then I know time is short, but I know this is pretty interesting, right? There's another book I want to bring up. It's a lot of fun, and you don't want to miss this. And you'll see why in a second. There's a third book that relates to some things of the Amduat, but it's from the time of the New Kingdom now. So now we're in the New Kingdom. It's called the Book of Gates. This is a funerary text that describes, again, like the Amduat, the 12 hours of the sun's journey into the underworld. With this funerary text also describing, going a little bit further, it also goes into talking about, for example, how there's 4 tribes of humanity. First, you have the Egyptians. Second, those known as the Asiatics. Third, the Libyans. And fourth, the Nubians. But anyway, according to this work, the soul was required to pass through a series of gates, with each gate guarded by a goddess, who are only special to each gate and are not mentioned in any other context. So making them very unknown in many ways. We don't know who these goddesses are. They're mysteries for the most part, except for the last one. Each of these goddesses wear a 5-pointed star above their heads. Some contend that these goddesses are actually representations of the most prominent stars to appear in the sky during these 12 hours of night. So that you'll see this star more prominent, and then that star more prominent, and each of these goddesses are connected with those stars. Now, how the soul passes through each goddess guarding each gate is to know and proclaim each of their characteristic titles. If the soul knows the title, they may proceed. But if they do not know, they may be cast into the lake of fire. For the first gate, guarded by the goddess of the first hour of night, the soul proclaims as follows. I'll just go ahead and I'll help you through the first gate. Is that okay? Just give you a little nudge. You're supposed to proclaim as follows: splitter of the heads of the enemies of Ra. Hey, I'm giving away the secrets. You want to write these down? So you say splitter of the heads of the enemies of Ra, and you pass on to the second gate, and the goddess, and the hour. You guys want to know the next one? Sure, I'll tell you. I'll get you the other side. The next thing you say is wise guard of the Lord. There you go. The next declaration are as follows. For the third goddess, you have to say the one who cuts through. The fourth, you say the one of the great power. The fifth, you say she who is on her boat. She who is on her boat. That's almost sounds like a celestial reference. Does that make sense? It looks like you're looking at the sky. It looks like that it's somebody that's in a boat. The sixth is successful leader. The seventh is the one who repels the serpent. So she's the goddess who repels the serpent. The eighth is lady of the night. Are you guys going to be hung up on number 8? You're the lady of the night. The ninth is she who is in adoration. She who is in adoration. These seem to be pretty nice, except when you get to the 10th one. The one who beheads rebels. The 11th is the star who repels rebels. And finally, the 12th, the witness who is the witness to Ra's magnificence. And so you have this idea of rebirth. Only with the last one can we be certain of the interpretation. With the sun as Ra encountering the morning world, the dawn, during this last hour, Nu, the deity of the dark primordial waters, is depicted holding up the solar boat of Ra with 8 deities on it, which is the Akdad, who are the 8 gods of creation. So that's there. Pretty cool. Yeah, I thought that was great. Now, Amenhotep, I do want to bring up Amenhotep the first. He was the first one that was buried in the Valley of the Kings. Amenhotep is also the first pharaoh to separate his tomb from his mortuary complex. And what's interesting here, I just want to bring up, is that we have somebody may be interested in this. We have from his reign, we have what's called the Ebers Papyrus, and it contains 700 magical formulas and remedies to cure you, and it's believed to be a medical manual. Since we have a birthday girl here tonight, I decided that let's read excerpts from she's a doctor, excerpts from a medical manual, again connected to magic during the time of Amenhotep I, who reigned approximately from 1526 BCE to 1506 BCE. It's called the Ebers Papyrus. Okay, so basically, if you suffer from asthma, the manual recommends that one collects certain herbs and then heat them on a brick so that one suffering affliction can inhale their fumes, which seems to be rational, but they mentioned the herbs in there. If a person is trying to protect their clothes from mice and rats, one is to, okay, get this. You're trying to protect your clothes from mice and rats. One is to smear cat fat upon them, and this is believed to magically ward off this vermin away. If you're having bowel problems, one is to combine a weed known as melliot with one date, cook them together in oil, and then anoint the afflicted area. The manual states, for the evacuation of the belly, you want to evacuate the belly, use cow's milk, grains, honey, mash, sift, and cook, and take in 4 portions. So you make basically cow's milk, grain, and honey, and you mix it all together, and that'll make you kind of throw it all up. To prevent getting pregnant, the woman was to smear a paste of dates, acacia, and honey upon wool, and then they were to place it inside of them as a depository. As for the ward away death, it was recommended that one will eat half an onion. So this is going to tell you, you want to keep death away from you. Here it is. You eat half an onion along with some beer, and this was considered, quote, a delightful remedy against death. So basically, you'll have bad breath, but you'll keep on living. So those onions, onions and beer. Yeah, you heard it from me. There you have it. And we will close with this last one because we have somebody here tonight who wants to hear it. And that is, let's talk about Hatshepsut. And we're going to go a little bit further. Let's go there. So Hatshepsut, while the pharaoh Ahmose I had focused his efforts on defeating the Hyksos during the second interval, Thutmose the first had conquered much of Egypt and also took Syro-Palestine to the Euphrates. Hatshepsut, 1479 to 1458, is known as the pharaoh who reestablished all trade networks disrupted during the second intermediate period, and by doing so, ushered in a period of great economic growth. So let's go to some pictures real quick. And we will see. So, there's more of the. This is the gate. This is the gate, the heaven, the gate of the gates of the goddess. Keep going. Okay. This is Amenhotep. The guy. Remember the guy that had the Amenhotep the first? That's him. By the way, he was deified and worshipped as a god later on, and you kind of see that here. Next one. There she is. There's Hatshepsut. There she is. A female pharaoh. Of course, there's quite a few female pharaohs even before this. That's a whole other talk that I did. Hatshepsut organized Egypt after the terrible time of the second intermediate period under the Hyksos. As I said before, you had Ahmose the first defeated them. Thutmose the first continued to defeat them, and then, of course, took over much of the Middle East to the Euphrates. But she's great at infrastructure. But she's also about balance. We'll talk about religion in a few seconds. What happens is as follows. Hatshepsut was one of the greatest builders of ancient Egypt, leaving many monuments of her rule all above the land of the Nile, and her statues are so numerous that they are found virtually in every major museum. Now, the precinct of the goddess Mut at Karnak, greatly damaged from the rage of the Hyksos during the second intermediate period, continued to be left in ruins. Even in the New Kingdom, she rebuilt that. She also built the Red Chapel of Karnak. But at a place near Beni Hassan, located in Upper Egypt, about 152 miles south of Cairo, Hatshepsut built an underground temple dedicated to the goddess Pakhet. The goddess Pakhet. Who is the goddess Pakhet? Let's go to the next picture. Not very good. This is the goddess Pakhet. You can see it's pretty. It's a very small, poor picture quality. Okay, we'll end up there. So thank you so much. Pakhet is a fusion, basically a fusion between two lioness goddesses. She's a fusion between Sekhmet of Upper Egypt and Bast or Bastet of Lower Egypt. In a sense, Pakhet was a cultural compromise between these two well-revered feline Egyptian goddesses, and was worshipped primarily in regions where the two border one another. Once again, I want to mention the fact that Sekhmet is connected to Upper Egypt and Bastet was connected with Lower Egypt. So what about people in between? So this is a realm in between that. So what happens, Pakhet was not as ferocious as Sekhmet, but also not as domesticated as Bastet. The name Pakhet means she who snatches or she who tears. Of Pakhet, the coffin texts declare as follows: O you of the dawn who wake and sleep, O you who are in limpness, dwelling aforetime in Nedet, I have appeared as Pakhet the Great, whose eyes are keen and whose claws are sharp, the lioness who sees and catches by night. Unquote. She was much like a wild cat or a desert lynx, hunting her prey by night, always alert to the slightest movement under her watchful eye. Because of this characteristic, her epithet was night huntress with sharp eye and pointed claw. Egyptians saw Pakhet's protective fierceness as masking her ideal goddess to call upon during the times of war, and eventually was looked upon as a war goddess too. Pakhet is typically portrayed as either a feline or a human with a feline head, looking either like Bastet or Wildcat, or certainly sometimes even like Sekhmet. Often various depictions of Pakhet, she is either shown with her claws wrapped about a snake or another prey of some kind, or standing over them in the victorious posture. Yet while her worshippers emphasized her ferocious mannerisms, they also strove to assert her very feminine nature as a goddess. Fierce, because she has to be a mother against potential forces or foes. And so she, as this divine mother, will show no mercy otherwise. For many of the Egyptians, Pakhet was the protectress of mothers, and so worshipped by mothers all about Egypt. Pakhet was a regional goddess who is often called the goddess of the mouth of the Wadi, or she who opens the ways of the stormy rains. because the regions where she oriented from is covered with narrow valleys that are called wadis that instantly turn into flash flood zones during torrential rains. That's why, so it looks dry and all of a sudden, boom, swift, it's flooded. Apparently, the goddess Paquette was appealed to for safety in events of these floods, along with for many other reasons. Much like Sekhmet, Paquette was the goddess believed to be the force behind desert storms. Paquette was also declared as Waret Haku, which means she who has great magic, an epithet shared by Isis and Hathor, revealing that Paquette had connections with these two goddesses as well. In fact, in this association, many mummified hawks were also found here, since Hathor was the mother of the hawk god Horus, so you see connections there. The pharaoh Seti I claimed that Paquette was his mother. So Pharaoh actually said that Paquette, that's my mom. He declared the egg, that being the son, of Ra, whom Paquette has given birth to, whom the one great in magic has made to come into being. The temple, by the way, it consists of a great underground complex of passageways and grand chambers that you can visit if you want to. That's great. The catacomb of the temple of Paquette are filled with mummified cats brought to this site from all of Egypt, intended to be dedicated to her in the form of Bastet and Sekhmet. Hatshepsut states, the pharaoh, she states the following in an inscription from the shrine. She says, the pharaoh says, she says, Paquette the Great, who traverses the valleys in the midst of the Eastland, whose ways are storm-beaten. I made her temple with that which was due to her Enneads of gods. The doors were of acacia wood, fitted with bronze at the seasons. The priests knew this. Her city, I made divine their temples, furnished with that which comes forth. The offering table has wrought with silver and gold, chests of linen, every vessel that abides in the place. Wow. By the Ptolemaic era, the cave was renamed the Speos Artemidos, which in Greek means the cave of Artemis. For Paquette becomes understood by the Greeks as, well, as you can see, as the hunter, since they correlated her with the great goddess of the moon and hunt, Artemis herself. Near the great underground temple dedicated to the goddess Paquette, Hatshepsut built a second, smaller temple to Paquette, but this time a shrine was both in her name and in the name of her daughter Neferer, who was also the daughter of Thutmose II. When Hatshepsut was elevated to pharaoh after the death of Thutmose II, she bestowed her title, God-wife of Amun, upon her daughter, meaning that Nefer was now high priestess of the cult of Amun. According to local Theban myth, the pharaoh was supposed to be the offering of a human mother and the great invisible creator god Amun himself. This tradition was actually a Theban innovation, for prior to the rise of Thebes, the pharaoh was only became a deity upon his death. But now the Theban story made him or her half human and half the offspring of Amun. They are both human and God while they are still alive, both divine and man, or divine and woman. In the role of God's wife of Amun, Neferer, her daughter, is depicted in her mother's red chapel of Karnak as performing a ritual ceremony with a priest that appears to be connected with destroying the names of their enemies, and of course, by destroying their names, destroying them magically as well. Hatshepsut also gave Neferer two other titles, that of Lady of Upper and Lower Egypt and Mistress of the Lands, and offered her powers untypical at that time, whereby her daughter was able to dedicate buildings and make public appearances in a manner almost like the queen herself. Neferer was probably still alive when her mother died, and when her brother Thutmose III became full pharaoh, as she's depicted as alive in Hatshepsut's funerary temple, but probably died soon after and didn't have any viable offspring. So, and we do have her body, Hatshepsut's body, but we have a CT scan on her. We know what she looks like. What's interesting is that Hatshepsut, her nail polish was black and red. She was a little bit overweight, had many skin lesions and extensive tooth decay. And there's indications of insulin problems as well, possibly diabetes. And she also had what's called alopecia. And so she's missing bits of hair. So, of course, you have Hatshepsut, and then obviously you have Thutmose III, and then Thutmose IV. And then, of course, eventually you have Akhenaten. And this is, I will show these pictures, but this is where I will stop my talk, but I will show these pictures. I'll just say something about Akhenaten. What will happen is, so the next picture there. So yeah, okay. Oh, that's another picture of Prakrit. That's great. You can see her there. Next one. Yes. Okay. So Akhenaten. So I don't want to spend. This is a whole nother talk, but basically what happens is that we realize that the cult of Ra, now becoming the cult of Amun-Ra, becomes really powerful, too powerful, to the point where many of the pharaohs felt like they were in competition with those priests of Amun-Ra, telling them kind of what to do. And so they'll all rise Akhenaten. Akhenaten, what he'll do is he will declare that that there will be no more worships of Ra. Instead, or Amun-Ra. Instead, we're going to be worshiping Aten, who is simply the disk of the sun. The sun, but doesn't represent anything because it's beyond comprehension. And so what he does is Akhenaten, with his wife Nefertiti, they form a monotheistic Egyptian belief system where there is only one God, and the representative, of course, happens to be Akhenaten. Let's go to the next image. And you can see there, they're kind of look kind of interesting. You can see the disk of the sun above. Go to the next image. That's Nefertiti and him. And there's another picture of the two together, Nefertiti and Akhenaten. It's very essential. Great lines. Thank you, Margie, for that. And then, of course, after that, what happens is Nefertiti actually does become pharaoh after him. We now know that. And then, of course, a few pharaohs later, and we have Tutankhamun, and that's yet another talk. But I think I've done my job today. I got through the pre-dynastic period. I got through the Old Kingdom. I got through the Middle Kingdom, and I got mostly through the New Kingdom. Of course, I have more notes, but I don't want to. I think this is the perfect place to conclude. We do have a real good idea of what Egyptian religion is all about. What was so interesting is that you can even see here various precedents, whether it be the cannibal texts or the half god, half man concepts, or whatever, certain kinds of, or the idea of the creation of the world, certain concepts that will connect to not only Christianity, but even earlier, some ideas that connect with Judaism as it develops. And of course, many believe that the Hebrews, the Jews, were in Egypt during the New Kingdom period of time. And of course, we'll get out around the 1200s with the arrivals of the Sea Peoples, and then they will be released from there. Okay, but and maybe there's influence there. Maybe there's a connection there, and that's something for another topic at another time. But I hope you enjoyed the magic and the mystery and possibly even the mirth of this conversation that I've been having with you. And I hope you enjoyed this. And thank you so much for being here. Whew. So I guess I will set the night barge and head on down to the other side. And may I rise the next day with Ra himself in the day barge to set a new day and a new perspective and a new way of life. Thank you so much.